Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey, podcast listeners, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with Martha Brooke. She is the chief analyst and founder of Interaction Metrics. Interaction Metrics is a consulting services firm dedicated to helping clients find the voice of the customer. During our conversation, she shares her thoughts on surveys, interviews, and other customer feedback programs. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you enjoy listening. All right, Martha. Hey, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, all right. Martha, tell me a little bit about your company and really how you got started in this customer survey and customer interaction.
Can we go a little wacko on this?
Sure, go deep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the meaning of life. Is that all right?
We could start there. Sure.
Okay. So I really think the meaning of life is to have great experiences and to pass those experiences on to other conscious beings. And so the way you do that is by listening to what's around you. And for businesses, that would be listening to their customers. Mm-hmm. And so by listening, companies improve the customer experience and eventually do provide those great experiences. And over time, they learn how to provide great experiences consistently. So I believe that in a small way, those great experiences add up and make the world a better place. So it really comes out of, I appreciate experience. I think experience matters. I want to provide the best experiences. That's sort of putting it on the positive spin. On the negative spin, I'm really irritated by crap experiences, right?
I've witnessed this myself, actually, Martha, with you. And so, yes, I understand this.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of Martha on a mission to right the world and help companies provide those better experiences, even great experiences, and even better doing that consistently. So that's what it's about. And I've been in business since 2004. The company is Interaction Metrics. I'm the founder and chief analyst. And I think we do make a contribution to the world through our customer listening programs.
And definitely, I think you do as well. You know, you and I have worked together on projects, and then I have introduced you to others. And I think it's something that's really fascinating for me. When you and I met a long time ago, actually, just absolutely fascinating that what you do. Tell me a little bit more about how does someone go about, gathering this information? I mean, I think that, there's some vehicles out there, but you go quite a bit deeper in your analytics here.
No, absolutely. I guess before we get there, Jason, I think it's really good because I started kind of on this, it's the mission, but sometimes I think it's good to come down to earth and just like, what is this customer listening, also known as customer feedback? What does it do for you? And over the years, we've found we've never had a project, I can honestly say, where we didn't find really important things. And in fact, we have projects that run day over day. So every morning we're churning out surveys, and every day we're finding out new important things. And they can be anything from the customers getting the wrong catalog to customers thinking that the competition is better at project management meetings, or customers saying, gee, they closed down my tech support case, but it's not resolved at all. So there's the mission, but there really are some very specific reasons to engage in this customer listening and customer feedback. And, honestly, without getting those kinds of insights, then they can be both tactical and strategic. I think without getting those kinds of insights, you're sort of running rudderless. I think that you're in the dark and it's hard to steer the ship.
I think it's interesting because a lot of the feedback, the clients I work with, they tend to be legacy businesses, family-owned businesses. And I think the feedback they've relied on for so long is maybe from their own salespeople, where it's completely biased. It just doesn't really give them anything. And so you see these companies not really changing very much. They tend to keep plodding along the same old course, and they don't understand, why am I not getting different results? And so I think that's where, someone like yourself goes way deeper, very, very different.
Right. Yeah, you can have that sense that we know what's going on with our customer because, hey, we took them out to lunch. But I mean, I don't know. When you take somebody out to lunch, they're pretty much going to say, hey, Jack, everything's great, really appreciate it. And let's talk about the ball game or whatever. So it's not about those deep insights. And yeah, for sure, that's what we pride ourselves on. I'd say deep insights, but also objective insights, which would be kind of one of our first really strong theories about what good customer feedback or good customer listening is. And that's to ensure objectivity. And so that's things like making sure that the sample is accurate and that you have eliminated biases from your questions and that you're testing for replicability, right? So that would be if you're coding those open-ended questions that, two or more analysts are getting the exact same results. Objectivity is, again, I think it's so important to eliminate bias. So instead of asking questions like, hey, how satisfied were you, which assumes the customer is somewhat satisfied, you're asking things more neutrally, like, well, how would you rate the expertise of our technical support engineer, whatever. So I think those are a couple of good tips on what this project, if you will, is all about.
Yeah, many companies have had experience, maybe dabbling in surveys. And, they've played around with some of the inexpensive vehicles out there, a Survey Monkey or something like that, or their own survey mechanism here. But it's really not the mechanism, it's more the questions. And I think you're diving into and you're kind of touching on the differences between a really good question versus just a question.
Right. So yeah, we sometimes call those the plug and play questions versus meaningful questions.
Okay.
Is it just something that you pasted out of somebody else's survey, or is it a question that's deeply relevant to your particular company? So I think this is a good place to riff on the Net Promoter Score question. That is, right. How likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? It can be a good question if you're a social company, that it makes sense. Like, would you recommend us? If you're social, that could be like elective surgery. Those are, you might recommend your elective surgeon, but you're not going to recommend your internist, right? Because it's too much tied to your insurance and it's too small a thing. I don't know. It would be a weird conversation to have.
Sure.
Enterprise rental car is always bugging me with their would I recommend, and it's like, are you kidding? Like, no, I wouldn't recommend you because I wouldn't talk about enterprise rental car. When I'm getting my rental car, it's who is cheapest, not. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So, who is closest to the airport? Who is,
exactly.
Which shuttle bus do I see first, or which one do I know comes around the quickest, especially in a cold climate.
Right, exactly. So yes, how likely you're to recommend can be good if you're social. If it doesn't matter if you're doing somebody else's question, I guess then it's okay. But generally, it's not a good question, and it's not a good question because, and this sort of piggybacks on what we were just talking about, Jason, it's not objective. It has bias. How likely are you to recommend assumes you're somewhat likely to recommend, right? If it does make sense to ask about recommending, just ask, have you recommended us? That's an empirical question. Coming back to what we were talking about, companies do this survey, and SurveyMonkey, there are a lot of good platforms out there, but just because you have a platform like, say, SurveyMonkey, doesn't mean that you have a good survey.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that, you can definitely, if you've seen enough types of feedback programs, that you can see which ones are effective and not. I've seen miserable ones in my past. I've created miserable ones in my past, just because, again, did not understand, and I believe it's nuance, that's really something that you spend a lot of time working on with these types of programs.
And then surveys are not, and we can talk more about surveys and what makes a good survey, because some of those tips and tricks can help your audience if they're doing it themselves. If it's a DIY project, it can help them. But looking at the constellation of different customer listening methods is a good place to go.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because that project that I remember doing for you a few years back was all customer interviews. There were no surveys.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So the interview is the recorded one-on-one customer interview is a fascinating way to get insights because it kind of functions as a focus group, but a one-on-one focus group. So instead of the focus group where you get the one guy who talks a lot and everybody else sort of listens to him or her, you get to hear from everybody equally. And an interview is like a conversation, so it unfolds sort of naturally. There's a back and forth, as opposed to a survey. It's unilateral. You've already decided what your questions are. So an interview would be more like almost what we're doing right now.
Absolutely, sure.
And it can go into some of the headier kinds of issues like, who is the competitor? What did they do particularly well? Tell me more about those experiences. And that can be an incredibly learning rich kind of insight that you'll never get from a survey, because people just don't write that much, right, Jason? Like when you do take surveys, how much are you, I mean, you might write a sentence.
How many, yeah, right. In the text box, it's like, I'll give a couple. If I like the person, I'll do some more. But generally speaking, no, I'm not really that invested in, I'm just not invested in it. I'll be honest with you. I mean, that's.
Right. Like, and no one is. Like once in a long while, we'll see a full paragraph that a customer's written. And generally that's, a case where the customer is spending over $1 million a year with our client, and they just happen to be really articulate and they just happen to have the time. But generally these kind of longer, more expansive answers are going to come through interviews. They're not going to come through surveys. So the interview is a great alternative to the survey. Another way to go is actually listening to, this is for companies that have inside sales, inside service, customer support, technical support.
Sure.
It's actually listening to those recordings. And so when we do a statistically valid sampling of those calls. We also do emails and chats. And that's a great way to find out because the customer will drop little clues about who they are, what they're looking for. You can hear a lot about what their expectations were for that company through that customer service interaction. So I guess where I'm going here is you can learn about the quality of customer service, customer support, tech support, but you can also learn more about who are these customers and what are they expecting. So that's a great way to go too.
That's more of a drop-in. You're really recording the normal business day, because most listeners, I would suspect that a lot of them have inside sales teams and customer support people like that. And so you're saying that you all would record this and listen for certain clues.
Generally, the client is in this day and age, the clients are generally recording all of those conversations. So they have a call recording system set up, and we simply have them download a few hundred of those calls into a folder, and then we do an nth select through those calls and listen to them.
And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to say that a vast majority of the industries, the folks that I see and the clients that I work with and the distributors probably are listening to this, that they haven't gone to that level. So, I mean, it sounds to me like that might be step number one, is to actually develop a call recording system, because I'm going to say most of them probably do not.
Oh, absolutely. So now it's not expensive to get call recording software set up. So if they don't have call recording set up, that's a great way to go. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, 'cause that's something that, I'm pretty sure that most of them don't have this going already. Now, some, more sophisticated entities probably will. I guess that kind of brings up the quick point, though. I mean, how do you introduce that to your customer service people or your inside sales people without them feeling like Big Brother is watching? How do you kind of bridge that gap?
This is the modern world where that's just how... That's just the reality.
Just how it is, man.
That's just how it is. Yeah.
Okay.
And when they say those call recordings, they always say this call may be recorded for training or quality control purposes or something like that. That really is the spirit of it. It is for training and improvement and consistency reasons. So, okay, Big Brother, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it is to help you become better at providing technical support, or to help you become better at inside sales or service.
Is that required to say that? This call may be recorded?
Yeah.
It is? Okay. Yeah. I was just curious. I'm envisioning some of the companies that I've worked with in the past. developing that language, because literally they're just they pick up the phone. It's generally these calls go directly to individuals rather than passing through a gatekeeper or an electric gatekeeper of some sort. So it's literally, I mean, they're going to have to change the method of answering if they are going to adopt something like that.
Right. And
Okay.
for some of them, look, it's just a couple guys, and it's just not
Right.
going to happen. And in those cases, sometimes mystery shopping is a great way to go. It's qualitative, right? We
Okay.
can never mystery shop enough to say, oh, this was a quantitative, statistically valid sample.
Sure.
And we do it in a B2B environment all the time. It's a great way to test how is a prospect treated. Somebody who's not yet a customer. So there are all kinds of shortcomings to the mystery shop, because you can't test how does that repeat customer, the guy who's buying week over week, how is he treated? Because we're not in the system that way. But we can be that sort of tire kicker. And we're thinking about changing over our accounts, but we're not sure. Can you just tell me a little bit more about, you and the inventory that you keep and how much you actually keep on stock, that kind of, and we record. So then you can hear how that call goes.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah, so that can be a great way to get more insights into how are those calls handled if they're chats. We can put out some chats. I'm thinking that you're thinking, oh, the companies listening to this don't have chat. They have email, though. We could certainly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
See how are the emails handled. So I think the point is that there's more than just the survey. There
Absolutely.
are other ways. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, stop at the survey. They don't really understand that there are all these different avenues that somebody could take, and each one of them is going to provide different types of feedback and different insights and different, ultimately different lessons, so that we actually can change eventually. I think that's the whole point of this program, or these programs, is that we actually do want to improve, and we want to change the way that we are interacting with these customers. Or potential customers, for that matter. Yeah.
Right. Behind what we're doing is incredible optimism that companies want to change, that they can change, and that in fact they will change. And we see it all the time, So it really is a closed loop, highly functional system that we're talking about. There is another approach to surveys that might be a good thing to talk about, which is simply relying, as much as we're saying no one writes, they will write a few words or a sentence. And one of our other tips about surveys is keep them as short as possible. You can serve up just a very simple couple of open-ended questions on your website, maybe through a pop-up or whatever, that just asks, tell us more about you and what you're expecting. Tell us more about our marketplace and what you'd like to see. The one kind of leading question that I will allow is the leading question of improvement as possible. So it could be, tell us how you'd improve us. Tell us what you'd like to see us do to improve, something like that. You have to use those kinds of questions really gingerly. Don't ask too many of them. But you can ask one or two questions like that. That might be something you do in lieu of a rating system survey. There are other ways to listen outside of surveys, and then within surveys, there are a few different approaches.
On a previous episode, I had a gentleman suggest that if you are going to ask a customer, how can I improve? You better be ready to do it. You have to be ready to actually do what they told you to do.
And I love it when we see companies go all the way 360 degrees and say, you asked for this, we did it, check it out here.
Right. I mean, I think that's actually, again, if you're willing to go this step and you're really kind of willing to be vulnerable and ask that question, how am I doing? What do you think of me? I mean, there's a certain degree of vulnerability to that, in your organization. But if you're willing to go through that process, you also have to be willing to take that advice, provided that it's, reasonable and it does actually make sense. And here's what we're going to do about it.
Right. So that comes under one of my standards, which is appreciate the customer. And that's one way to appreciate them, is to say, hey, you suggested this. It was a great idea, and here it is. So that's showing genuine customer appreciation. Another thing, and this kind of comes back to a tip and trick for a survey, is in this time when everybody, I don't know about you, Jason, but when you travel, don't you come back to like 5 or 10 of these surveys? Hilton,
Oh, God,
Enterprise,
yeah, I get them all the
right?
time.
Like
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
wants to know how they're doing. And, there is that's another reason to do observations. Like instead of pestering the customer with your survey, observe how does our staff interact. Those are the ride-alongs. It's a great way to go. But anyway, appreciating your customers, not pestering them continually with your surveys. But then when you do have surveys, make sure you're asking provocative questions and then appreciating them through a Starbucks gift card or
Right.
an Amazon gift card. Thank you. We appreciate you being a customer. We appreciate you taking your valuable time to tell us how we're doing. Here's a $10 gift card from enjoy a coffee or two on us. That kind of thing.
Sure. Is that before or after? Do you have people that if you take this survey, you get X and then they'll take the survey? Or is it something that you do after whatever feedback it is and you say, hey, here's a thank you?
Right. Not to sound like the consultant, but it depends. It depends. So
Great answer. That's a consulting answer right there.
So one way to go is to not say anything about the gift. If it's a $5 gift card, not say anything about it. And then at the end of the survey, hey, thank you for your time. We have a small gift card to send you. Please provide your name and email. Okay, so that's just a nice, like, a thank you. But to stimulate response, that's where it's still generally we like to see $10. We've done $50 Amazon cards. It kind of depends on what level you're talking to. So this is where it's the big, it depends. It depends what level. If you want a CEO of a larger company, let's start talking about $150, right?
Right.
Especially for an interview that might be 10 or 20 minutes long, and yet it's so worth it. On the other hand, maybe it's a lower level person and you're not doing it to necessarily stimulate response, but just to say thank you, that $5 can be totally fine. Then sometimes you want your survey to really stand out. Maybe your response rate isn't what you wanted it to be. And so now it's time to, in that email that introduces the survey, to say, we so appreciate you and we so appreciate your time. We're going to send you a $20 gift card from Starbucks to show our appreciation of you spending 10 minutes of your time filling out our survey. Yeah, so that's that. Appreciate your customers and test, see what works, test for what you need to do. And then there's also the just do the right thing. I think that's something that you and I talk about, Jason, a lot, right? It's like sometimes it's not even about stimulating response or anything about your survey. It's just because it's the right thing to do. They're your customer. It's like, why do you teach your kids good manners? I don't know. Is there an ROI? I don't know if there's an ROI on that, but it's just the right thing to do.
So they do not embarrass you publicly. That would be the ROI right there.
Yeah. So do we have time for a couple more tips and tricks?
Absolutely. Yes. Please share a couple, and then I have another question, but go ahead.
It's always important to talk about analysis when you're talking about a survey, because all too often people are like, okay, here's my survey monkey. Please don't cut and paste and plug and play, just a bunch of nonsense questions in. Please take the time to think out those questions. But then when all the data's in, take the time to really prioritize the analysis. So that's where you go through the open ends and don't just read them, code them so that you can quantify and find out if there are emergent themes. Maybe run correlation analysis. Maybe there was one big question about customer effort or customer satisfaction, and then you want to correlate some of the sub-questions to that to see, well, what drives satisfaction? Or what drives this sense of how much effort a customer is expending on your behalf. So analysis, so just because you did the survey doesn't mean that you're done with the survey. I guess that's how I would summarize that tip. Yeah. And then the last of my tips is do take the time. Now you've done the analysis, find the story in the data. So again, this is where sometimes the survey, it's like, oh, great, we did the survey, washed the hands, we're done. And absolutely not. That was the beginning. Now you're going to tie customers' verbatims, their open-ended responses in with the scores. Or maybe you combined interviews with your survey, so you can combine those recordings with the survey. So it's always combining different media so that you can really illustrate how customers are feeling. Sometimes infographics can help, charts can help, and always, just not to overly perseverate on the point, but combining different media really, really helps people understand, oh, this is what we learned, and I really want to take action on this. And I guess, again, that's why those interviews can be so valuable, because you hear in the customer's own words, and we put together themed audio files so that you're not actually having to listen to all of those files, but you're getting the highlights around certain themes that emerge from the interviews. So tying that in with survey results can be really, really powerful. But don't just stop at, we did the survey, wash our hands, we're out of here. Now the work actually really begins.
Yeah, once you've done your analysis, which is no easy step, by the way. I mean, and I think, as you're explaining, this survey or this analysis process, I'm going to say that a vast majority of people that are even considering this have no idea how to analyze that data. I mean, just none whatsoever. And obviously, that's where you come in.
Right. I would say it's a somewhat rare skill. Certainly, you didn't just wake up in the morning and know how to analyze a data set. Mm-hmm. When we code verbatims, especially if we're getting a lot of responses, there can be a tedium to it. And yet, again, without doing that, it's kind of, well, why did you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why did you go through this process? Why did you, you've created whatever this mechanism is, whether it's interview, survey, or mystery shopper, or whatever it is you're going through, why did you do it? And what do you expect to, do with this information? You gather information. That's just, as you said, I mean, that's really the beginning point.
Yeah, that's this whole find the story in the data, because otherwise it just sort of, it's like, oh, well, thanks, Jason. That was really good information, but no one's acting on it. And what you care about is, again, that optimism. We're going to find out how we're doing with experience, because we want to offer great experiences, and we want to do that consistently. To really get reps and outside salespeople involved with the findings, you need to find the story.
Right. Interesting. Now that makes a whole lot of sense here. For the listeners here, how can they get involved with your company if they wanted to engage your services or learn more about great surveys? And I believe you write blogs and you do some other things, but tell me how they find you.
Because interaction metrics, they might forget that, but they can Google on interaction, like we're having an interaction, and metrics, METRICS, so metrics spelled the right way. And we come to the top, but they can also type in interactionmetrics.com and we'll come to the top. They can Google on Martha Brooke, Brooke. As you said, we have a blog, and what I do with our blog, it's under the Insights tab on our website. What I do with our blog is generally tear apart companies' bad surveys. So most recently, there was a Kaiser survey that's a big HMO here in the Northwest. Ratted out their bad survey. Alaska Airlines has been the topic. Whole Foods has come up, challenging some of their survey practices. You know how you get the invoice at Whole Foods says, take our survey? So one of my analysts one day, Mark, took the survey and he was like, now let's compare it with the Safeway survey. And so we wrote a blog about that. And it's fascinating that some of the biggest companies in the world are doing really crap surveys.
Didn't you get called out for this for this blog or something like? You went after some company and you got called out because you went after.
Yeah, sure. That's just. But you know what? You can't. Not everybody's going to be your friend.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's a good way to learn a little bit more about customer listening, and it can be engaging. I would certainly link me in. Yeah. Because then you get apprised of whenever I've written a blog, and sometimes I post it right on my LinkedIn. So
we'll definitely have you, all the links in the show notes and all that kind of, in my good Tim Ferriss way. I will have all the links in the show notes, and we'll have many ways, especially on our website, distributionteam.com. We're going to have links to Martha and her services. This is a subject that you and I talk about often, and it's really interesting. And because I know that many of the listeners, this is not something they've they've ever dabbled into. And so anyhow, well, I hate to do it, but thank you so much for coming on and speaking with me for a little while.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's been really, really fun.
All right. Well, you take care. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.